Today, we'll be downloading and installing version 7 of Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. To start, we'll go to veeam.com and go to the product section and Backup for Microsoft 365. This one will take us to the information page for Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. We'll follow the download link and scroll down to the product download section. Now here we have two installation options. The first is for Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. The second is for Veeam 1. Veeam 1 will be discussed in a later video, but this is the monitoring and reporting that you can use for Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, as well as other products within the Veeam ecosystem. We'll start off here with downloading Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. You can scroll through and agree to the license agreement, and this will start the product download. Once this is finished, you can run the installation and follow the installation prompts in this window for installing Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. You will again need to agree to the license agreement, and this will check your configuration and make sure that you meet the system requirements, ask you for where you'd like to store your data location, and then simply go through the rest of the installation process. In real time, this usually takes under 5 minutes on any server. So we'll go ahead and hit finish and close out of these windows so that we can see this new icon on our desktop. And we'll go ahead and run that new icon. And this will be the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 console. Now we can either run this in the Community Edition, or we can install the license now, and we'll go ahead and run this in the Community Edition, and we can install that license later. So we'll go ahead and add the organization first, and we're going to be running in the modern authentication without any legacy protocols. If you do need things that require legacy protocols, you can for now use legacy protocols or use the basic authentication, which is just a username and password within a user account. But optimally, you do want to choose the modern authentication whenever possible without using legacy protocols. Next, we can either register a new application with Microsoft, or we can use an existing application if we already have something configured. And we'll go ahead and run through the automatic process here. And what we first need to do is make a name for that application. So we'll name this here V7 VB365 EN app. Now this is going to be for enterprise application, and now we need to make a certificate for this application. And we're going to give this a unique name as well so we can keep track of these certificates in our console here, and hit next. Now we'll use a device logon authentication. Enter in the code and authenticate with an account that has permissions in order to A, deploy an enterprise application in your organization, and B, has administrative permissions to deploy the permissions on that enterprise applications necessary to perform backup processes. Now this will go through and configure the application automatically for you. This also only takes a couple of minutes to finish. And once done, we'll hit the finish button. And the very next thing that is recommended is to deploy auxiliary either backup accounts if you're doing basic authentication, or if we're following best practices, we're going to do auxiliary applications. So what we can do is either add if they already exist and we know their application IDs, or we can also use an automated process to create, and we'll do this now. And we're going to give these unique names. So they're going to be V7 VB365 Enterprise App. And the unique name is going to be Aux Backup for auxiliary backup accounts. Now we'll also need a certificate for these. And again, following with best practices of giving it a unique name. And we'll let the default of 5 in this case and use the authentication method provided with that same elevated permissioned account and come back to our server. This will take a couple moments to deploy those enterprise applications for auxiliary loads for the SharePoint and Microsoft Teams backup in your organization. Now that those are deployed, we can go ahead and create our first backup job here. And we'll go that by clicking on the organization and hitting backup at the top. You can also right click on your organization, hit backup job here or on the white area and select add backup job. We'll go ahead and name the job and then create the scope. You can select your entire organization to back up based off of individual users, groups, sites, teams. And if you do want to back up the entire organization, but maybe just the organizational teams within this job, you can also do that here, as well as add individual users and a variety of different scopes within that users. Say the OneDrive is the most pertinent in this case. And exclusions are just as dynamic, where we have exclude from backup this group. In this case, we'll be using the default proxy and the default repository. If you have specific windows where the job should not run, say on an on-premises environment, you can configure that here, or the job will not run. We'll go ahead and start the job here immediately after this is created. While that job runs, we'll go ahead and add some additional components into our infrastructure. First of all, we can add additional object storage repositories here, and we'll get that added in through Azure Blob. And we'll create a primary repository to start with. And I'll need to go ahead and add those credentials in here. Now that we have the storage account added in, we'll go ahead and select a container where we would like to send backups and a folder on where we'd like to send those backups to. In this case, this is not the immutable repository, but the next repository we add in will be immutable and will show the configuration with that checkbox. We'll hit finish. And now we're going to add in our locked repository where we're going to send off a backup copy. This will also be a blob storage, but this can be also anything S3 compatible, including Amazon storage and service providers like Wasabi. And we'll select that locked storage account, select the container, browse, name, make sure we select the box, and hit next and finish. Now that we've added the objects, we need to associate those with repositories. Now the first repository we will set up here will be the primary repository. And we'll send that to an object storage. And we still need to select a local cache. And we'll send that here and say local pri. Here we select the object storage, select how long to keep that data for, and hit finish. Next, we're going to be adding the secondary locked repository. And we'll send that also to object storage. We'll need to select a separate cache for that repository. And now we'll select the locked object storage and the number of days we would like to lock that storage for. Keep in mind, this cannot be lessened at a later period in time, meaning if you set this for 3 years, this will in fact be locked for 3 years and you cannot delete any data even from the administrative side on these respective repositories, the flags have been set. So we'll go ahead and set this for 7 days since this is in fact a demo environment, and it will lock it on these repositories for 7 days. Now let's go create some jobs that are centered around making sure this data is locked. We'll create a new job for an object repo. We'll select a job scope of one of our sites. And we'll make sure finance gets sent to this site. We'll go forward, select the primary repository, make sure this job runs. And now immediately off of this primary job, we can add an additional backup copy and send it off to this locked repository. Now, whether or not we want to send that data immediately, daily at specific times, or periodically, is all within the scope of the scheduling. We're going to go ahead and send this immediately off to that secondary repository. So as soon as this job finishes, it's going to kick off our backup copy job so that we know that data is set off to the proper location. Next, we're going to be configuring our self-service portal. And let's go ahead and get started with that here. Now we'll start up in the upper left-hand corner in the drop-down menu and General Options. We'll need to set up the authentication to enable the self-service portal and install that certificate. And we're going to call this auth certificate for our authentication. We'll hit apply. Now we'll come over to our restore portal, check this box for a restore portal and hit configure. We're going to go ahead and register a new application, hit next, select our region and give it a proper name. And this one is going to be portal. And now we'll need a certificate. And here is where we need to create an address for us to be able to connect to the self-service portal. Now this will be very specific to your environment and how you connect into this server. In this case, I'll be using a local address to connect to the server. And the port address is going to be 4443 by default. Now we'll go ahead and authenticate this here. Sign in with the appropriate account. And hit finish. We'll hit apply and enable the RESTful API. Install the certificate. This one will name RESTful. Hit apply again. And this should finish the configuration for the self-service portal. And hit OK. Now we can configure restore operators. These grant access to anyone that is not already within the backup job, access to do restore operations on behalf of other users. And we'll call this admins. You'll select the organization you'd like the user to be able to restore based off of. In this case, I'll give myself access in order to do restores on behalf of the entire organization, but you can scope this down to any individual item that is necessary. Let create and OK. Now let's go ahead and test this new restore process by going to that address. And don't forget the port 4443. In advance here, since it is not a locally recognized certificate with a certified domain authority, I did have to pass that window, but now I should be able to log in with my certified Microsoft account. And after logging in here, it authenticated with Microsoft to make sure I have permissions to do restore operations. First, I can select which items I'd like to restore from, and I can already see that there is data for me to be able to do restores from this Vanguard's team site. Select the point in time I'd like to do the restore from. I can apply that here, and this will reach back out to the Veeam server and say which items I'm able to do restores from at this point in time. I can execute those restores immediately right from here if there's any data from these items to restore back to. In the next video in this series, we'll be taking a look at adding Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 into the Veeam One console and how you can get all of your monitoring in one place.